And we're live. Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Wheelie Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Atoll, and I'm joined again by Electrek's Seth Weintraub. How's it going, Seth?
I'm good.
Awesome. And we have, for the end of the year, our annual biggest e-bike stories of the year. This is going to cover not just e-bikes in terms of electric bicycles, but also electric motorcycles and a few other things in the space. So we're going to have a bunch of different stories that were basically chosen by you guys, the stories that got the most views throughout the year. It's going to cover everything from legal issues, new laws about electric bikes, to specifically new models. We're going to look at some e-bike policy, both in the US and around the world, as well as some opinion pieces. And we've also got, just in time for the season, a fun review of a powerful snow e-bike as well. So a little bit of everything this time. What are we going to start off with this week, Seth?
All right. Starting today, California is coming for your e-bike throttles. How dare they?
Yeah. And this takes us right back to the beginning of the year. This was January 1st, 2025. One of the biggest stories of the year was about California's tightening of their e-bike regulations. And what's interesting is that this one specifically, it was more of a rewording of their laws to bring them back in line with what they intended them to mean, especially with regard to throttles, which you saw in the title there. So the biggest issue was about Class 3 e-bikes that have throttles. And for just like a quick refresher for those that aren't in the know, which is at this point probably a minority of our listeners, Class 1 and Class 3 e-bikes typically do not have throttles. Class 1 goes up to 20, Class 3 goes up to 28, whereas Class 2 e-bikes in the middle, they're limited to 20 miles an hour, but they can have a throttle. Now, for a long time, that Class 3 has been sort of like a hybrid realm where a lot of manufacturers would allow it to go up to 28 miles per hour, but would include a throttle that would cut out once the rider got to 20. So it was sort of like fulfilling the idea of the law in that once you get to 20, it's, it cuts out and it leaves it basically a Class 2 e-bike. But if you want to keep pedaling, then you get that Class 3 pedal assist up to 28. And so while that was sort of the idea, what California wanted was to sort of tighten up that law and make it very clear that if you've got a Class 3 e-bike, then it shouldn't have a throttle on it at all. That even if it cuts out at 20, that's not good enough for California. So that's one of the things that they put in that new law, and it was sort of the main thing that had the biggest effect. But there were a few other small things in the updates to the law as well. Some notes about bikes that are designed to be unlocked to go faster than legal speeds. Originally, there was a law saying that people couldn't sell devices that would allow you to unlock your bike. So, that targeted businesses and like eBay sellers and stuff like that. But then they eventually expanded that to say that even, a personal user of an e-bike, once you unlock a bike to go faster, that's now illegal as well. It's not just sort of penalizing the vendors or the people that sell those dongles or the software upgrades or the apps that can unlock that stuff. So California this year has really sort of led the charge in terms of tightening regulations. Now, I wouldn't say that a lot of this is going nuts. This isn't like New York City's 15 mile per hour limit. These are more like regulations that try to bring the specifics of these laws back into where they were originally focused. Especially keeping that Class 1, 2, 3 kind of pure. So I wouldn't say that California is going off the deep end here or anything like that, but definitely this year, more than any other state, California has updated several of their e-bike laws multiple times to tighten up those regulations. And I don't know about you, Seth, but I definitely see this as like a harbinger of what's to come. That next year, I would not be surprised at all if we see more states following this lead and starting to tighten up their state level e-bike laws, especially after we've seen cities like New York City doing their own thing as well.
Yeah, I mean, we see states following California quite a bit in a lot of realms, in electrification and otherwise. Most listeners will know that I'm a fast e-bike fan. I don't necessarily believe that all of these laws make sense. I kind of feel like it should be left to the localities, but then of course you ride through one part of the town and you have one law, and then you hit another part of the town, you have another law. Is that going to be helpful? Probably not. The class 1, 2, 3 system makes sense, especially for bike lanes. But I wonder if maybe there's a kind of like, all right, if you're in a bike lane, you need to have these regulations. If you're just riding on a street, maybe 28 miles per hour makes a little bit more sense with a throttle, or maybe even 35 miles per hour. It's a tough. We're in a tough situation right now. And then if you really look at it, if you like take a wide angle view of this whole situation, like we're the nuances of the speed are so important for these like basically bikes. Meanwhile, you have Hummer EVs and Silverados with no speed limits, no speed limiters on their vehicles, driving really fast. They can't see over the hood of their car. Like the real problem isn't like some guy riding around on a fast e-bike. The real problem is that we have these huge cars that are not built at all for safety of pedestrians and bike riders. But like, God forbid we put a speed limiter on any of those, or like build these to safety, or like, hey, let's have a maximum size that you can ride on a road. And none of that seems to be touchable by localities. So let's hit the bikers.
Yeah, absolutely. It almost seems like my set list for this podcast, but we're also going to be getting to to the issue of maybe e-bikes aren't the most dangerous things on the road, believe it or not, as well. But yeah, I absolutely agree that, like, yeah, putting important regulations that protect e-bike riders is a smart thing to do, but let's be realistic about where the dangers are, right? Like,
Right.
let's all be realistic about this.
Yeah, I mean, New York City, 15 miles per hour. Does that make sense? I don't know. Maybe if you're in a bike lane, you want to have a certain speed. But if you're riding on the road in New York City, there's absolutely no reason you shouldn't be able to go 40, whatever a taxi's going, or whatever like those big
Yeah.
trucks are driving. Like, why would
mean-
you put a limit on the bikes and not the huge, dangerous, crazy vehicles that are, going with the bikes? So maybe
Yeah.
it's like, you have a speed limit for the bike lane, you have a speed limit for the road. I don't know if that's the right solution, but
Yeah, I mean, it seems reasonable, especially with a lot of people worried about e-bikes colliding with pedestrians that are walking across bike lanes. Now, that's another issue about, like, we need to be responsible walkers as well and look where we're going and not be down in our phones.
right.
But I mean, New York City also has, I believe, a citywide speed limit for its roads at 25 miles per hour, if I'm not mistaken. So I wouldn't mind saying, a 25 mile per hour limit, which actually I believe was already the e-bike speed limit, because I think New York City specifically, or maybe it was New York State, limited class 3 to 25 instead of 28, which was a little bit annoying to have like such fragmented laws, but I get it if you've got 25 mile per hour citywide limit on the streets. But exactly, like, if you're on the road, you should be treated as a road user, not, have your speed cut by 40% when your vehicle weighs 5% of the vehicles around you. Like, that's just
If
crazy.
that, yeah.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it's weird that so many people are worked up about e-bikes when there's these vehicles that are destroying people and bikes all the time, and nobody, like, God forbid we even say anything about it. Like, can you imagine, like, oh, New York says that if you want to come into Manhattan, you have to have a speed limiter on your car that goes 25 miles per hour. Do you know what would happen? Like, it would literally be the end of days.
Yeah, it would be like the purge would
Right.
happen. Yeah.
All right, let's move on from this here. Bafang's new automatic shifting hub motor could change urban e-biking.
Yeah, this is an exciting one. Earlier this year, we saw this new hub motor announced from Bafang. It's part of their, I believe it's called the GVT line, and this one specifically is their 3-speed hub. We've seen in the past their 2-speed hub, and the beauty of this is that it combines the sort of internally geared hubs that we know and love from Dutch bikes with a hub motor. So Bafang is obviously famous for its hub motors. They're found on a lot of the lower cost, but still, pretty decent e-bikes out there. But the downside of a hub motor, which usually mounts in the rear, is that you generally cannot have an internally geared hub. You have to have a derailleur on the back or a belt drive, but then you wouldn't be able to have multiple speeds. And so by combining an internally geared hub transmission with a hub motor, it suddenly allows the rider to have the best of both worlds, which I really love internally geared hubs because it removes that derailleur. It's one less thing I need to worry about because generally internally geared hubs are just basically maintenance free. You pretty much never need to do anything to them. They're just tuned to work. They don't get damaged. It's not like a derailleur that you can catch it on the curb, or if you put it in your vehicle, it can get like banged up against something. It's not a delicate system that way. So you get the advantages of internally geared transmissions that way. And plus, this one is designed to be an automatic shifting rear hub, so you don't even have to worry about that shifter on the handlebars. Now, there's nothing electronic. This is kind of like beautiful engineering in that it's a fully mechanical automatic shifting hub. It basically has weights that are tuned so that at specific RPMs, it knows to shift speeds. And I think that they can slightly modify that for different OEMs if they want their shift points at different RPMs by changing the weight of those masses. But basically, it's just a very elegant mechanical system that means you don't have to have any extra wires going in there, whether electrical for sending the shifting signal or mechanical for a cable. You don't need any of that. It's just like an enclosed automatic shifting mechanical system. Plus, you get that Bafang hub motor. Now, I think that this, if I'm not mistaken, is just a 250-watt motor, which kind of makes sense because this is probably more in line with what European e-bikes would be spec'd at. We don't see these internally geared hubs as often on US e-bikes. They're just not as popular, but they're very common in Europe, especially with that Dutch bike inspiration, where people want that enclosed system, something that's always going to work, that they don't need the maintenance on, especially since Europeans tend to, on average, put more miles on their bikes than Americans do, because they're more likely to be used as a car replacement as opposed to in addition to a car, or as like a weekend recreational bike, which is very common in the Americas here. So this is probably not going to be a high power solution, at least not anytime soon. But it definitely seems like a cool solution, and I'm really excited to see the engineering that went into it, because it's such an elegant design that solves a lot of problems, from maintenance to wire runs to even like waterproofing and damage. When it's all sealed in there, it just has so many advantages that you don't get with other solutions. So this was a really cool one for me to see, and it seemed like our readers agreed, because this was a very popular article and people seemed pretty jazzed about it.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the future of e-bikes, like internal geared, like I definitely like belt drives. I definitely like, the complexity, removing the complexity from systems. This is kind of like what I imagine the future is going to be like. Especially for, I'm not super low speed, but like, base 20 mile per hour class one e-bikes makes a ton of sense. And it's kind of like one of those things. Like I have a Luna Eclipse. It's a belt drive, fat tire bike. And once you get to 15 miles per hour, your legs are starting to fly around quite a bit. So this kind of, it would be nice if they made a Luna Eclipse version 2 with this thing, and it would be so much better that you could, keep normal pedal speed the whole way through and not have to rely on the throttle at 20 miles per hour. So I think this is perfect. And I think this is kind of the future of e-bikes. So good for Bafang. They seem to be kind of ahead in many of the areas that we're looking to the future of e-bikes.
Yeah, they're rocking with a lot of these innovations. They're definitely not just a motor company anymore.
Yeah. And you would think like Gates and I guess other belt drive companies would be kind of on board with this because of the the inability to have a belt switch gears.
Yeah, this
Have
is
you ever seen a
perfect.
belt go through like a like there's no belt drives that
Derailleur?
have like shifting, right?
I've never seen something like that. Not that like actually derails it onto multiple pulleys.
Right.
No, I've never
Yeah, that
seen that.
seems impossible. All right. Let's move on. Popular high power electric bike brand announces shutdown.
Yeah, so this one is specifically about e-cells, which early in the summer this year announced that they were shutting down. It was not that long after the multiple rounds of tariffs, and the company indicated the tariffs were definitely one of the reasons that led them to shut down the business. It was so close to the tariff announcement. This was early May, and I think the tariffs were in early April, if I'm not mistaken. That I have to wonder if that was the only thing, but it's certainly a good example of something that has happened over and over again, not just e-cells, but we've seen this with many e-bike companies in the US this year. E-cells specifically was a bit of a niche company focusing certainly on the higher power models. They were famous for their dual motor e-bikes. Oftentimes that went with dual batteries, dual suspension, fat tires. Like these were some very powerful off-road rugged bikes, which was the majority of what they were making. And so while they definitely had a dedicated audience there, especially in hunters, that was one of the, I think, the largest single groups that were into these e-cell bikes were hunters and outdoorsmen. That's still, a small piece of the e-bike market. And so I think that when you're working with that small of a sliver of the pie there, and you're seeing your importing prices increase by as much as double or more during the height of the tariffs, then yeah, that can absolutely just squeeze a smaller e-bike company until there's nothing left to give. And so this is terribly unfortunate that not only did this happen to e-cells, but to so many other smaller e-bike companies, and not even the smaller ones.
Yeah.
Like we've been covering Rad Power Bikes in the last few weeks. Just this week, they did announce their bankruptcy, which we often think of like bankruptcy as the end. It's not really the end. It often comes as a one of the last steps before the end. But the company in Rad Power Bikes case is saying they're still working on finding a buyer. This basically buys them a little bit more time. Essentially, it means that like their debts are kind of off the table for now while they try to find someone that wants to take on the Rad Power name and the debts that come with that, but hopes to sort of like revitalize things. So from smaller companies like eCells to larger companies like Rad Power Bikes, this is unfortunately a story that's been repeating itself over and over again this year, and last year as well. Even 2024 had quite a share of closures as well. There was Juiced. Actually, I'm not sure if Juiced was 2024, even the tail end of 2023. But a lot of bigger names unfortunately went out of business as well. And so eCells, for some reason, this one gathered a lot of interest. I think perhaps because it was one of the more powerful e-bike companies, and in the U.S. we love our high power bikes. I'm right there with you, Seth, and you are absolutely not alone in your desire for those higher power models. And so this one was a bit of a bummer, even I think for the people who didn't own e-cells, but just liked that companies like that existed with the
Yeah.
dual motors and that sort of thing. Um, so it's terribly unfortunate to see this, and I'm worried that we're not even near the end in terms of these closures. That 2026 is still not going to be kind to a lot of e-bike companies that have struggled to keep their heads above water for the last few years. I would not be at all surprised to see more of these companies, even some of the bigger ones, struggling into 2026 and potential closures there as well. So it's something that we'll have to keep an eye out for, and I hope it doesn't happen. But the realism says that we're probably not near the end of this.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed about your rad story was that a big chunk of the money that they owed was to the US government for tariffs. Like, you know, I imagine that is what's kind of, maybe the straw that broke the camel's back in a lot of these cases where, like, you have these struggling companies and then all of a sudden they have to whop on a bunch of tariff payments. And of course, some companies are going to the Trump administration and, kissing or licking some boots and maybe getting an exemption. But, if you're not a huge company, you're not going to get the attention of the administration. You're going to lose out and you're going to go bankrupt. And there's been a lot of these. And like, what do? Like, you can't move your operations to any more like there's tariffs everywhere now. So it's a it's a tough situation.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like obviously the goal was for this to cause US manufacturing, but I just don't see that don't see that happening. I mean, the one company that we often touted as like the example of US e-bike manufacturing was Electric Bike Company in Newport Beach, and they closed earlier this year. So I mean, they were a perfect example of the problem with this philosophy because yes, they assembled their bikes in the US. I mean, there was some argument about, like how much is local assembly versus made in America. I tend to ascribe to if you assemble it here, you've basically made it here. Um, but their problem was that most of their components came from overseas, like their brakes were from Taiwan, their motors were from China, their batteries were from Korea, like all these parts come from overseas.
Right.
And so they still had huge tariffs despite employing American citizens to sit there for 9 hours a day building bikes. And so if they couldn't make it and they were the poster child of US e-bike manufacturing, then who can make it? Now perhaps building in Newport Beach was not the best plan in terms of high rent and labor prices and that sort of thing, but still, I mean, they had been there for like 8 or 9 years, something like that. I
Yeah,
mean, the company was not a new company, and
that's
if
frustrating.
they couldn't make it, then no one's going to be able to start up e-bike manufacturing on any scale like that if they had an 8-year head start and couldn't do it. So it's unfortunate that these tariffs are just going to keep putting pressure and not achieve the goal that they were hoping for, which was to bring that manufacturing here, at least in terms of the e-bike industry. I did actually hear that there's a company, Wink Motors, that I covered several years ago with those mini cars,
Hmm.
like the low speed vehicles. I did a test in New York City, and I just heard that they are going to be starting to assemble those in the U.S. And so I need to do a little more research on that to figure out like what's going on there because that's an even bigger undertaking than assembling bikes. But that one might have actually somehow onshored manufacturing, which I mean, those previously were built in China. So, like, yeah, the tariffs on that would have been crushing. So, if they're able to avoid those tariffs and have significantly lower cost, low speed vehicles because of that, then that will be a pretty cool story.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see who's able to survive this. I also often wonder, and we're obviously pitched by a lot of fly by night companies. I wonder if sadly the model is start a fly by night company, get a couple reviews, make some sales, and then by the time the tariff guy comes around to collect, you just say we're done. Like I wonder if that's like the model that you have to do now is like make a bunch of money and then when it's time to pay tariffs, just call it a day.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that like when I saw how much money Rad owed in tariffs, I was a little bit jealous that I was like, they get credit. Like I have to pay my tariffs before I'm ever allowed to touch a thing,
I
and they
know,
get to
right?
bring things in. I guess once you get to a certain size, you work on credit with the customs and border protection. But for me, like if I don't pay those tariffs, like I don't
You don't
get
get
my
your thing.
weird thing that I just bought from China. Yeah,
Right.
like it's an order of operations here.
Yeah.
I
All
guess
right.
once you get to that size, you get
I
special deals, at
guess. I
least in
mean, I
terms of
guess.
payment.
I guess when you're just getting, shipping containers by the dozens, you just
Yeah.
like
I
pay
mean, at one
later.
point they bought their own ships to like bring containers in. They were doing such high volume
That's
during
crazy.
like the crazy like shipping crisis of the pandemic. Yes, I mean
That's
they were
right.
bringing in like probably dozens a day of containers.
All right. Well, let's move on from that. We alluded to this one earlier. If you think electric bikes are bad, there's a much bigger menace hitting our roads.
Yeah, this was one of the most popular articles of the year for the e-bike industry, at least. Though I think a lot of them were angry clicks because it was, I don't want to call it a bait and switch, but I think the messaging here is correct that, like, yes, there's been a lot of anger against e-bikes and people worried about safety. But like Seth and I briefly mentioned earlier, and what I think deserves a much larger discussion in our country is if we truly care about road safety, then where can we make the biggest gains in terms of actually saving lives? And the fact of the matter is that you've got so many car accidents killing, first of all, tens of thousands of Americans in cars, but also thousands of pedestrians outside of cars every year. That if you compare that to how many people are being hurt by e-bikes, whether on e-bikes or pedestrians hit by e-bikes, I mean, you're looking at orders of magnitude differences here, 50 times, 100 times difference. And so to be putting the amount of effort that many cities are putting into e-bike regulations basically seems like I don't know, malpractice if you actually care about creating laws to protect people. Like we should be looking at reinforcing speed limits. We should be looking at creating safer crosswalks and bicycle lanes, that sort of thing. Because if the argument is that lives are worth protecting, which I think that we can all agree on, then coming after e-bike throttles is not the answer. It's not going to save lives the way that regulating car speeds is, the way that regulating bicycle lane infrastructure is, that sort of thing. And so to me, it's just amazing that we've somehow sold people on this idea that e-bikes are the danger. And it comes from so many different angles too. Like it's amazing how well e-bikes have been scapegoated with fires. Like people are like, oh, e-bikes are going to catch on fire. It's something that electric cars went through for a while as well. I mean, still, there's this like misconception that, electric cars are going to catch on fire when the statistics show that, internal combustion engine cars catch on fire like 20 times more frequently or something like that. So like, it's not just e-bikes, it's EVs in general, but e-bikes specifically have gotten scapegoated from so many angles, from the fire, from the safety, from the regulations, from non-e-bikes being treated as e-bikes, the Surons and that sort of thing that people confuse with electric bicycles that are in the like, class 1, 2, 3 system, that sort of thing. So to me, the fact of the matter is like, yes, there are dangers out there. Yes, we do need to regulate our roads. But if we all agree on those, then let's do it in a way that protects people. And that's with regulating the things that are actually killing people, cars and trucks. And even like if you compare the US to Europe, we all drive cars, that sort of thing. But the death rates and the like serious injury rates are so much higher in the US just because of the differences in regulation, the design of the hoods of cars, the weights, the heavy SUVs and trucks that you just don't see as often in Europe, that sort of thing, let alone the protected cycling paths. So there are so many ways that we could tackle this problem, and many of them are not that difficult, but the easiest thing is to blame it on e-bikes, even if the numbers don't support it, and that seems to be what has happened. I guess I don't even have to ask if you're in agreement with me on this one, Seth.
No need. Yeah. Your mouth to my brain, whatever. It's all kind of the same thing. And it's, I kind of feel like they're picking on the small guy because they can. Because, nobody's going to, like, any regulation that goes to cars is going to be fought by AAA, the automakers, like Billy Bob and the pickup trucks. Like, everybody's just going to lose their mind. No, obviously pickup truck. I have friends with pickup trucks. But it's just frustrating because they can go after e-bikes because they're like the new kid on the block, and they're like, well, this is different than last year. Like there's a bunch of, kids riding e-bikes or whatever. So like, well, let's get them because like, God forbid we actually address the real problem, like infrastructure or, like we keep making pickup trucks bigger every year. You can't see over the front hood of a pickup truck to see a biker or a pedestrian or school kids or whatever. That somehow is like, whatever. But, throttles. Oh God.
Yeah, exactly. It goes how fast? 28 miles an hour?
Yeah. We got to get that down 3 miles per hour because come on.
Yeah, that's where we're going to save lives, in that 3 miles per hour on an e-bike.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. China urges citizens to trade in old lithium e-bikes for newer lead acid electric bikes. That seems backwards.
Yeah, this one also, it was a bit of a head scratcher, but there is some logic to it. So this was a pretty popular story almost a year ago, this past January, where China instituted a program which encouraged citizens to basically replace their older e-bikes with newer models that had lead acid batteries in them. Now in China, most of the e-bikes are what we'd often consider more of like an e-moped or an e-scooter, where you're rarely actually pedaling them. They're more like a seated scooter shape. But either way, these generally had, years and years ago, they were all lead acid. They, in the last few years, many of them have switched to lithium, though I would wager that probably a majority were still lead acid. But in the early days of lithium starting to take a larger proportion of that market, there were still a decent number of battery fires. Now, just like in the US, these are a incredibly small percentage. We're talking about like fractions of a percent kind of thing. But it was a big problem, especially in China. Many people live in, buildings, towers where you've got, hundreds or thousands of people in these big towers. And so any fire in any single apartment affects a lot of people. And so one of the ideas was that they should start switching people back to lead acid batteries because these are generally speaking safer. Again, small number of fires in lithium, but even smaller numbers of fires with lead acid bikes. And so this was very early this year. Since then, there have been a whole new set of e-bike regulations that were instituted in China. Every couple of years or so, there's like a whole new like white paper on e-bike regulations that comes out, and then companies generally have 4, 6, 8 months to sort of update their designs to come in with the new laws. This summer we got new laws. China got new laws that considerably increased the regulations around lithium-ion batteries to a level that's one of the safest in the world probably at this point. And so while they did encourage a lot of people to switch back to lead acid, and they created like buyback programs and vouchers and that sort of thing, at this point the regulations for lithium ion batteries are so strict that you're probably looking at some of the safer options in the world right now for the very newest of the lithium ion batteries that are built to the new higher safety standards in China. But either way, it is sort of strange to see this and see any country saying, all right, we had it with those lithium batteries, let's move back to lead acid. So if that strikes you as weird, that's why there is at least some logic to the idea there.
Yeah, and obviously since then, there's been some newer, uh, not AGM batteries, but lithium phosphate, sodium batteries. There's
Yeah, sodium ion looks interesting.
Yeah, and it's very stable and safe. So uh, I get the sentiment, like you know, don't you don't necessarily need the most efficient type of batteries for e-bikes, but lithium ion, or sorry, lead acid seems like you're going back too far. You're hitting the wayback machine a little bit too much in that regard. So
Yeah. Now, to be fair, the newest lead acid batteries, they're often called AGM for absorbed
AGM.
glass mat. They're like pretty good. I mean, they're better at retaining battery quality over longer periods for longer cycles. They are better at, deep draining than they used to be. Certainly nowhere near the numbers we see for lithium ion batteries, but they are better than, I remember like in college working with lead acid batteries, and like if you drained those close to zero, like the next ride you felt a difference kind of thing. And so
Mm.
they're certainly better than 20 years ago, but they're not anywhere near the lithium ion standards. But I agree with some of the newer chemistries, and especially sodium ion. I think, in the next 3 to 5 years we might see some really interesting sodium ion options for e-bike batteries, because they're available now. They're just like on the cusp of being commercializable. And so it'll be a few years until we see them spread out in the e-bike industry, but it's not, a decade away.
Yep, it'll be good to see that, and solid state as well. All those things are kind of coming down the pike.
Yeah, hopefully.
All right, Honda's new super low cost electric motorcycle could come at the perfect time.
This one got a ton of excitement. I think whenever people hear that Honda could have an electric motorcycle coming, there's just a lot of pent up demand for that, because
Yeah.
Honda is such a powerhouse in the two-wheeler world. And so this one comes from a patent that we saw from Honda for a what looks like a fairly low cost, modest power electric motorcycle. Now, this image we're looking at, if you're watching the podcast here with us, This is an AI interpretation of the patent drawings. Basically, it looks like from the patent that they basically took their Shine 100 model, which is a 100cc or a 99cc motorcycle from their Indian market. They basically took that frame and a lot of that bike and stuffed in an electric drivetrain. So basically, I took that patent drawing and a Shine 100 motorcycle, and I fed it into an AI program and said, "What do you think like Honda would make this look like?" And so this isn't the final image of this potential bike coming. This is an interpretation of it, but considering it looks pretty close to the Shine 100 from Honda, it makes sense that this is what we'd be looking at: a sort of smaller format, a pretty economical looking naked motorcycle, basically. Now, we're probably not going to be talking big power, 5 kilowatts, somewhere around like 7 horsepower is probably the neighborhood we're looking at. This is not going to be a huge range kind of motorcycle. This is very much an urban bike. So it looks like it's got 2 removable batteries in there. They are the Honda MPPE batteries that we're seeing them start to bring out in their swappable battery ecosystem. This is Honda's like sort of version of a Gogoro battery. I believe those are somewhere around 1.3 kilowatt hours, if I'm not mistaken. So we'd be looking at 2.6 kilowatt hours for this bike. Again, not huge. An electric bicycle's averages around 700 watt hours. So, we're talking like 3, 4 times an electric bicycle, but probably with speeds approaching 50, 60 miles per hour. So, you need the bigger battery power, but the faster you go, obviously, the faster you're going to drain those batteries. In terms of pricing and market, we have no idea what Honda could do with this. And again, this is from a patent. So we don't know that Honda's actually going to produce it, but it makes sense because Honda's mostly been targeting these smaller motorcycles for their first electric motorcycles. And the fact that this one is basically fully developed from the technical side, as we see in this patent, it means that it's from here on out, it's basically a marketing push to see if they can get it, over the line to produce and sell this thing. It's no longer an engineering challenge. So we know that they've built several smaller electric motorcycles. They even have their first sort of full-size electric motorcycle with the WN7, if I'm not mistaken. So Honda is no longer against two-wheeled electrification. They've sort of been catching up, and this could be one of the first really affordable models they push out, considering they built it upon the frame and basically the platform of one of their most affordable gasoline-powered motorcycles. So hopefully they bring this out. Hopefully it's not just a bike for India. This one I could see being popular in the US for younger riders, basically like an upgrade from a Suron kind of thing. If you want a street legal bike, but you don't want like an $8,000 electric motorcycle, because this thing looks like they could bring it to market for much less. Maybe not, 4,000 like a Suron, but I could see them selling this thing for 6 or 7, which would be awesome for a street legal Honda electric motorcycle.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, half the kids, half the boys anyway, growing up right now are either on Surons or, similar or jonesing for one. So if there could be a street legal version that, required them to get a license, this might be a hot item. I do wonder though, like, is Honda going to be late to this? Because there's a billion different Chinese bikes that are going to be, as good as this bike, probably better in a lot of ways. And there's like, we could go to Alibaba right now and pick out 50 of these, similar for, $5,000. So, I mean, the fact it is Honda, it's a name brand, the probably will be homologated properly. Those are advantages, but like, they're late to the game here. Like there's already, and what Honda could do, frankly, rather than build their own bike, is find a good Chinese OEM and get it homologated, slap a Honda sticker on it, and call it a day. I'm sure that's very tempting.
Yeah. So for the first part, like, are they going to be late to the market with this? Probably yes, but like you said, I don't know how much it's going to matter because they're always going to come in with that Honda name and the Honda service and the dealerships. And for a lot of people, that's, a huge difference. Like for me, I could have bought a Livewire, I could have bought a Zero. I went with the Livewire for many reasons, but one of them was that every Harley Davidson dealership is basically a service center, or most of them, not all of them, but most of them. And so, I have a lot more options. Something like a Zero, it's a brand name, but like there just aren't that many locations. So for Honda, that's a huge advantage that they have this wide dealer and service network. In terms of production, they have uh, licensing agreements and production agreements with Chinese companies already. There's that like Wuyang Honda or something like that, which is like their Chinese partner. So I could see them potentially producing this there. They already do with a few other Honda models that, I mean, they're basically Chinese bikes that wear a Honda badge because of that, their licensing deal. So they benefit from Honda's engineering, but they've got prices more like a Chinese motorcycle. So that could be definitely an option for Honda here. I 100% agree with you on that one.
Yeah. Well, it'll be good to see them at least in the space, whether they get there with a sticker or a new product. All right.
Yeah.
Let's move on. Not safe or legal. Cops continue crackdown on Suron-style electric bikes. This is the big one for me.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, this story kind of repeated itself a few times this year. This is just one of the ones that had the most views, and it was not the only one I should mention. This specifically was a story out of California. It was the Manhattan Beach Police Department sharing how they've been cracking down on riders of Surons and Talarias. Basically, all of these, they're often being called e-motos now, which is not the best name for them, but it's the one that is sort of starting to stick better than anything else. These are basically mini electric motorcycles that kind of look like dirt bikes. If you've ever seen a Suron, they basically all have that same look. And the problem is, while these are awesome bikes for off-roading and for fire trails and jump parks and that sort of thing, very few of them, almost none of them, are actually street legal, but the majority are being ridden on the streets, often by teenagers and young riders. And so it's a big problem because these are not designed with NHTSA safety regulations. These are not designed for on-road use. Like this one, you see even has like off-road tires, which are not the best for riding on street, especially when things get wet. So you end up with a lot of safety issues. Not to mention, a lot of the younger riders using these things have never learned the rules of the road. They haven't gone through a driver's ed course yet. They haven't gotten the chance to learn the rules as drivers, and they've never driven a car. And so they're just sort of figuring it out. They might not understand the nuance of right of way or other various road rules. And so it's a big problem in terms of safety and regulation. And police all over the country have been cracking down on these. Usually they'll either cite the rider, sometimes cite the parents. Often they'll impound the bike, which is a shame because they usually call like a rollback flatbed tow truck, which seems crazy for a little, like 120-pound e-moto. Kind of a waste of resources. Just throw it in the back of that cruiser and call it a day. But yeah, a lot of kids are having these things impounded because they aren't designed for on-road use, and they're not legal for that purpose, whether that's bike lanes or riding on public streets. The other big issue is that these are leading to a lot of confusion in the regulatory space because people they don't realize that they're not electric bicycles, or they don't know where the line is between the legal entity of an electric bicycle and what this is, which is basically like a small, light electric dirt bike. And the term e-bike is, it's kind of all encompassing these days. Like the legal term electric bicycle is a legal classification. That's, the class 1, 2, 3 bicycles. But the term e-bike is often used all over the place. Like in motorcycle media, you'll still see companies refer to a live wire as an e-bike, meaning like electric motorcycle, but because, they'll call a Harley a bike and a live wire is an e-bike. So like all over the place, the term e-bike is already misunderstood and not really a legal term. And so this only leads to more confusion and muddies the waters in terms of what is a legal bike. And for a lot of riders of electric bicycles, the legal ones, they worry that this is going to bring, undue attention and much stricter regulations on legal electric bicycles that get caught up in this mess of kids riding like 50-mile-an-hour motorcycles on the streets. So it's in my opinion a big problem all around, and I think it's only going to become more common to have these sorts of issues with these bikes and police next year as well.
Yeah, and you can add a couple different things to the confusion. There's like pedal kits for these things, which technically, under some laws, make these things legal. But they're obviously they're not really pedals for the sake of pedaling. They're pedals for the sake of being legal. I believe Luna sells pedal kits for Surons and Talarias. I know there's, you can go on Alibaba and basically throw a sprocket with some pedals on there, and for $100, like if the laws are written in a way that if it has pedals and it can be 20 miles per hour, then it's fine. So you have that, and then you also have midway bikes that are kind of like a Tudio. Are you familiar with the Tudio?
Yeah, isn't that like a mini Suron?
It's kind of like a kid Suron that cops out at 30 miles per hour. So like, is it an e-bike or is it a Suron? So there's like,
Okay.
a gray area there. And then of course you can buy a, $25 controller kit for that thing. And all of a sudden you've got a 45 mile per hour bike. So, it's a little bit more complex than cutting a brown wire, but not too much more. And, even like on Amazon, the most popular thing to buy with a Tudio is the controller upgrade thing, which is, $25 or something. So it's just, it's a complicated mess. I think you kind of have to come in with some like smart high level stuff, maybe up from the federal level, and say, uh, on roads, e-bikes cannot go above 40 miles per hour. And on bike lanes, they cannot go above 28 miles per hour. Like something high level, easy, and, kind of defeats the purpose of pedals, because you can throw pedals on a there's some joke. I don't know. Have you heard the joke? Like, if my grandma had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. Have you heard that joke?
No, I
No.
haven't.
Well, I'll send it to you later, but there's that joke. But if you put pedals on, anything, is it a bicycle? Maybe. I don't know. Like that, for a lot of laws, that's the case. But you kind of kill that idea by making throttles illegal, I guess. Anyway, like, long story short, this is confusing. It's obviously very popular. They're obviously in very high demand. Maybe if they can make some smarter laws around it, maybe, a path to making them legal, a path to making them safer. Like, all right, we're not going to pull you over and take your Suron if you take a class, get it plated. You have a registration. You're not like 8 years old. You have to be, 14 or something. Like, some common sense laws would high level stuff would benefit, but that, we never see that in legal circles. So good luck to us all.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, we're going to finish it up with this last minute snow bike, which we didn't have much snow to test it in, but posted this today. This is called the Enfe, ENFE bike, which, it's like one of those, but did they just smash the keyboard, or did they actually come up with a name? We do not know. But this bike is interesting because it has two 1 kilowatt over like 100,080 watt hour batteries. One looks like a gas tank for a motorcycle. One's like on the down tube, like typical. It's got full suspension. It's got 2 lights. It's got 2 motors, each with a peak output of 1.5 kilowatts. So on paper, it looks like, an absurd e-bike that should go really fast. And actually, it does. Like, it accelerates 0 to 20 pretty well. But in my testing, getting up to 32 miles per hour was a little bit more of a challenge. Although my son, who weighs about 100 pounds, was able to get it to 32 miles per hour pretty quickly. So this is one of those things where, like, is a bike with all-wheel drive, does that make sense? Like, should we just put all the power on a motor in the back, or does a motor in the front help? And I will say, like, it accelerates faster than any regular bike I've ever used. It doesn't accelerate as fast as a Suron or a Talaria, but this is the kind of bike that the cops are probably not going to pull you over about. And it goes 32 miles per hour. It's a little faster than class 3, 28 miles per hour. And it does have pedal assist. So technically you could be in a legal green area. So it,
It's
it
hard to
has
talk your way out of that 32, but yeah.
yeah, 32 is not really happy place. Specs wise, it's a typical Chinese e-bike. It's got Shimano tourney derailleur. It's got two I think Bafang 1.5 kilowatt motors in the front and the back. They're identical. It is, it does have a comfortable seat. Like you're not going to be pedaling this too much. The kind of funny thing about this one was that the specs say range 200 miles.
Oh, jeez. And
And
pedal assist
I'm
one.
just trying to imagine the scenario where like, I mean, this bike is inefficient in every possible way. It's got big knobby tires. It's got two huge batteries, two motors. You're sitting upright. It's got high handlebars. Like there's nothing about this bike that looks like a range thing. Like, of course, if you go 5 miles per hour and you barely touch the throttle, yes, you can get to 200 miles. Like theoretically it's possible, but if you're using it like most people, you're going to be cranking the throttle, you're bumping up against 32 miles per hour. Those pedals are really just pegs. You're probably going to hit 50 miles per hour or 50 miles of range, which is like, that's great. That's, the 20-mile commute, no problem. So it's fine. I just kind of wish that we would keep the range realistic. I mean, wasn't that
Yeah.
Delfast record-setting bike? Then it wasn't like 200 miles or something.
Yeah, but they set that at like 11 miles an hour or 8
Right.
miles an hour or something. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the point? I guess what we should do is like come up with a standard. Like, all right, we're going 20 miles per hour. We're pedaling, but we're not pedaling that hard, and we're going around a track, and we'll see how far it gets, or something like that.
Yeah. Or at least say like in pedal assist one, 200 miles, so that like people understand that if they really want that, they're going to have to be going at, 7 miles an hour, which if you do the math is like riding all day or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So, overall, like this bike is, you get what you're kind of thinking you're going to get. It is a fast, fat tire e-bike. It does do well in snow, accelerates. It does well on gravel and even some mild dirt paths. Obviously, with a front motor, heavy bike, two batteries, it's not going to be as maneuverable as a mountain bike or even like a Luna Ludicrous X2. Like those, if you want a mountain bike, that's the way to go. But if you're just cruising along 30 miles per hour on dirt roads, um, gravel, whatever, this is a great bike. It's good in the snow. We had a little snow to try it out on, but um, you know, I don't know that this is going to be much better than some of the other fat tire e-bikes, like my hay bike that I use in Vermont. I don't know that a front tire acceleration would be that much better to have in those scenarios. The knobby tires are probably a much bigger uh, addition. What do you think? What's your take on this bike?
So, from my experience, one of the areas that I think that the second motor can be a big help in is if you have those long hill climbs, because then it often helps just keep the speed from dropping as much.
Hmm.
Like, I don't know how your hay bike does in some of the hills there in Vermont, but I'm guessing this one probably on those serious hills you have in New York probably did pretty decent on those hill climbs. Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly my son, who's about 100 pounds, had no problems going close to 30 miles per hour up a significant hill.
Oh
So,
wow.
yeah, I mean, you have 3 kilowatts of power, and that seemed like it is the peak. A nominal is probably closer to 1 kilowatt each, so 2 kilowatts. But that's enough to get a light person up a steep hill pretty quickly. And it kind of needs to be said, like they really went kind of crazy with the look of this thing, and I think kids who are like trying to get their parents to buy them a Suron, this might be a good alternative, a little bit more legal. Um, it looks kind of motorcycle-y, which the kids like these days. So, maybe this is a good option for parents whose kids are like, hey, I want a Suron, and you don't want them to go 50 miles per hour. This will keep them around 30 and give them the look that they desire, and some of the other features that are, I wouldn't call this safe by any stretch, but a safety bike, but it's certainly a lot safer than um, a Suron or a Talaria.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And like, while the nerd in me feels the need to point out that like technically not to the the letter of the law legal, I'm not going to worry too much about 2 miles an hour here or
Right,
there. Like a 45-mile-an-hour Sur is very obviously over the line. If this one goes 30 instead of 28, like it's like cars going 40 and a 30. Like it
right,
happens. So I'm not going to worry about my e-bike that goes 3 miles an hour too fast, that kind of
right,
thing.
right. Yeah, and it's yeah, like I said, it's a lot safer than other options out there, and it has turn signals. Like a Talaria Triple X doesn't have turn signals. And are those little turn signals in the back beneficial? I don't know, but it's certainly better than none. So
Yeah, that's my bone to pick with turn signals on bikes is that like I love the idea. It's just in practice, especially the rear ones, like you said, the rear ones are usually on just that single
yeah,
red mount, and so like they're literally an inch apart. The front ones I see on this one are actually decently spread apart.
yeah,
Maybe that's interpreted, but it's the rear that most cars are going to be seeing, and so that's where I mean, and that's why like when there are motorcycle regulations, like DOT regulations for motorcycles literally have requirements for how far apart the turn signals need to be spread, and that's the reason so that they're interpreted correctly. So that's why those regulations exist for road legal motorcycles, and why the turn signals on most e-bikes are, in my opinion, kind of useless.
yeah.
But I like
So
the idea.
yeah, I mean, if they had put these front turn signals on the back, I think that would have been a huge benefit. In fact, maybe that's what something I'll do to make it a safer bike. But yeah, this is a great. I mean, $1,400 like seems like a great deal for
Oh yeah,
a little bit more interesting of a than your typical electric XP or Rad Runner or whatever. Like this is definitely going to be a more interesting bike. Uh, a lot flashier, some more range, nice speedometer, big huge display. It's got NFC tag if you want that. I don't find that useful, but
yeah, I hate that
yeah,
personally.
I know. It's
To me, it's a nuisance. Again, like I like the idea, like the
yep,
security feature. It's nice to think like, how can I protect this? But in practice, that's another one that like fails me in practice because like, oh, where do I put that card? I end up leaving it on the handlebars so that it's
right.
there, but then it defeats the purpose as a safety thing or as a security thing.
And this one also has a pin, but I also hate that too. Like I just want to jump on the bike and go.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm sure there's a way to turn it off in the firmware or something. But
Yeah, that's
um,
why to me, like a physical key is just the best way. Like, yeah, you can't create like you can't digitally give it to your friend. You need to find it. Like the pin is nice that like you never need to carry something. So there is that one advantage of the pin, but yeah, maybe I'm just old school, but like a physical metal key that I put in and turn is the best security device for me.
yeah, totally. Anyway, I thought it would be a nice bike for people who need winter traveling, and I think for $1,400, it's kind of like a low risk proposition. And if nothing else, you get a lot of batteries and a lot of motors. So it might be something to consider this holiday season.
Yeah, and I hope you get some snow and we see some donuts soon from you.
Yep, yep. All right, let's go to the comments. We got a lot here. All right, e-bikes need to have a age before you ride. All right, there's some government officials right there. Still not going to stop. Uh, it's not the bike, but the rider. I think we're all kind of on board with that, but still, you can't kind of control the riders. So you do need to do something, I guess. How did they come up with 28 miles per hour? Do we know the history behind Class 3?
Yeah, it's because they took the European regulations, which were 45 kilometers per hour for speed pedelecs and 45 45 kilometers per hour translates to 28 miles per hour. So
Oh,
that's how they got there. That's why
we can blame the Europeans.
yeah, there's in the same vein, the California law allows throttles on class 3 e-bikes, but they have to cut out at 3.7 miles per hour. And the 3.7 miles per hour is because that is, I believe, 6 kilometers per hour, which is the limit in Europe for throttles on e-bikes, basically to allow walk assist.
Oh, walk assist. I would
Yeah.
think also like, accelerating up a hill off a line or something like that. That might be a benefit. I don't know.
So they are useful for that. Yeah, that's a good point. My sister had an e-trike for her kids when her kids were like babies that she would take them around in, and it was a European design, and it had a like 3 mile an hour throttle, and she basically used it to get rolling, like you said. So that's a good
Yeah.
another good use for it.
All right. Good history lesson there. Wow. Here we go back to the beginning. I think that's about the lead acid batteries, probably. I missed the beginning.
Yeah.
How do they offer reasonable range on SLA batteries?
I mean, they don't really. Well,
Yeah.
it's less than lithium ion range, or they just stuff more in, or like we talked about, the AGM batteries are a little bit better these days. You can drain them a little more before they go kaput. But yeah, you're not getting as good range as the same watt hours in lithium.
Yeah. I mean, they have the deep cycle marine batteries. Sometimes the AGM batteries are a little bit better. Golf cart batteries, that kind of stuff. All right. I thought about electric unicycles still having battery. Thoughts about electric unicycles still having battery fire issues. We familiar with electric unicycles having battery fire issues?
I wasn't aware that they're that much higher than other micromobility devices. There are a lot of sort of no-name electric unicycles out there, but the big names, I haven't really seen having that much bigger issue in terms of fire. Though I don't follow it quite as closely as I do the e-bike world.
Yeah. That would be sufficient just for just city travel. I think. What are we talking about at that 37 point?
I think that might have
The
been the Honda
Honda.
motorcycle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Honda. Yeah, makes sense. The Honda e-motorcycle is interesting, but I think the specs you're giving are too close to an e-bike to make it a great option.
Well, I think the speed is going to be the differentiator. Like, yeah, the batteries maybe, 2 to 3 times bigger. It is, bigger. Like 5 kilowatts doesn't sound like that much more. But when you're talking about 45 miles an hour, maybe 50 miles an hour compared to an e-bike, I mean, that gets you as an active road user as opposed to feeling like you're, squished into the shoulder. And I think that's where it'll click for a lot of people.
Yeah. As Surons and Talares go, e-moto word suits better than e-bike, if not perfect. I think, yeah, I think we're kind of settling in on that.
Yeah. And, we talked about how e-bike is not a great differentiator either because there's so much in there. But yeah, the problem with the e-moto is, to me, it makes me think of the actual like legal electric motorcycles, Zero, Energica, Livewire, those kinds of bikes. Whereas most of these Surons and Talarias, like they're more of a light electric dirt bike than a street legal electric motorcycle. So to me, it still slightly sends my brain in the wrong direction, or like at the wrong angle.
Would moped make sense? Like, could we go back to the old school?
That one I think has too much ped
Pedal.
baggage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. You can legalize it while reaching the road requirements as it's classed as a moped or motorbike. Yeah.
I think that's when we were talking about the Surons. Yeah. In some
Uh,
places, that legalizing Surons is a tricky subject,
yep.
varies state to state and city to city.
DUI would get pulled over with the Yasma in 10. Yeah. So the Yasma is like a Tudio. It's a very low power Suron type bike.
Yeah. But they all kind of have the same legal issues, I think.
Yep. 40 miles per hour, I guess. Would love to see an e-ped equivalent reg to mopeds, 1.5 horsepower, 1,000 watts and 25 miles per hour. I think that's good. Pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, at 25 miles per hour, it's like, why not just an e-bike? But I
Yeah.
guess that would allow you to throttle up to 25 as opposed to e-bikes need to cut out at 20 on throttle. So, yeah, I mean, if anything, for like mopeds, I would love to see something slightly more, like make a 35 mile an hour limit, something like that, because the problem with mopeds, except for a few states that have moped specific laws, in most places, like a moped is a motorcycle. Like once you pass electric bicycle limits at 28, like you're into the same class as, like a 1,000 liter or a 1,000 cc motorcycle. Like there's no middle ground. So I'd love to see a national like moped class made.
All right, another Yasma question. So yeah, we're talking about low powered Surons. Michael Shinzelis, I'm not in compliance myself, but the feds say legal is less than 750 watts. Not sure how states get around this. Yeah, it's just a bunch of rules.
Yep.
Yeah, there are two different Tudio e-motos. One goes 40 miles per hour. Clearly don't know your laws. They're allowed on road, Inc. UK at any range of speed over 15. It is classed as a moped or motorbike, and you need license plates, mirrors, and learner stickers. So maybe the UK.
I don't think either of us are up on UK moped laws.
Yeah. All right, 31 miles per hour, 50 kilometers per hour would be my cutoff to keep up with city traffic. Yeah, somewhere in the 30 to 35 mile per hour zone is probably best for that. All right, let's see. Seen the unpronounceable e-bike video you posted today? Yes, the Enfe. It sounds like Pig Latin almost. The Fen bike, but don't want to tell you. All right, 200 miles if they're all downhill with a tailwind, maybe. Yeah, that was tested by one of those CEOs that just flat out lies about their. All right, 22 kilograms, 55 pounds, 50 kilometers per hour, 31 mile per hour max would be my class 3 ideal. So we're just basically adding 3 miles per hour. Everything else is fine. And also a throttle, I'm assuming. I want a worst case scenario range, not the best case scenario. Peg the throttle at full speed until the battery dies is a more helpful range estimate.
Yeah, that would be a really nice number to have, just like wide open throttle, flat ground. How far does it go? Because that's probably closer to the realistic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the worst case scenario. The Chevy Bolt actually had something like that. Its top speed is like 92 miles per hour. Like it is governed there. And there's something like you can drive for an hour and a half at that speed.
Wow.
So you can go 180, maybe it's an hour. Yeah, you can't. I mean, it's normally has 260 miles of range, and pegged at 92 miles per hour, you get about 60% of that. So
that's like your get out of Dodge range. Like if you need to floor it,
if the cops are chasing you, this is how far you will get. A little bit more legal, more like a little less illegal. All right. Potato.
Tomato, illegal tomato.
Those rear turn signals are more identifiable if you have a red light in the middle on. A little, but come on, guys.
From close up, yeah. But like if you're in a car like 20 meters back, to me, I think it looks just like a flashing middle light as opposed to turn signals on either side. That's my opinion.
All right, question. Are we bike mechanics? I would say no, but like sometimes I'm forced into that role. What about you?
I mean, I did work in a bike shop for many years. I'm not currently a professional bike mechanic and that I am no longer paid minimum wage to work on bikes, but I do a lot of my own stunts in terms of bike work.
Nice. Yeah, I'm trying to get my son into bike mechanics. He's put together a bunch of bikes for me. And I'm like, dude, you have the skills. Like, why don't go get a nice job? Alas. All right. I have a Tudio Adria. It goes up to 42 miles per hour. And can you believe I cannot get it registered in my state because their database is not recognizing my VIN number? I can believe that.
Yeah, the shocker. Yep. You mean your Chinese motorcycle's not in the US DMV?
Yeah. What's sometimes called the cheapest e-moto on Amazon is not in the database.
Oh, is that the
Tudio is kind of called that? Yeah. I think Saronster did a video like, I got the cheapest, I got 10 of them. Yeah. First commenters get whatever. I've been riding for 3+ years here in Indianapolis, and cops don't worry about you if you're not passing traffic like a jet plane. I would say that's also the case around where I live. As long as you're not an idiot, you can be on just about anything, including a Suron, and they don't seem to mind. If you're an idiot and you're riding a 10-speed acoustic bike, they're gonna pull you over. So
Yeah, I feel like that's like the two-word solution to so many problems is just be cool.
yeah,
Like, don't cause problems. So yeah,
that'll get you 90% of the way to anything, and that's just in life in general.
yeah, definitely. And I guess coming from the city with one of the most famous races in the world, Indianapolis, makes sense
Yeah,
that they would be a little more chill about that as long as
yeah,
you're being fairly chill.
yep.
All right, so I think that brings us to the end. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in now and all throughout the year. We had some pretty interesting, wide-ranging stories for 2025, and I am sure we are going to see many more interesting things next year. So stay tuned. We'll be back for our next episode in another couple weeks to start off 2026. We will see you guys next time.